Also being demanded is a by-election to find Steve Chadwick's replacement on council. Local body rules allow for the highest polling unsuccessful candidate from the last election to come onto the council.
I really felt Dennis Finn would be the right person. He was an ex-highest polling candidate. Only a year, but over a year or so. So I thought it would be the right thing to do. However, other councils had an opinion that you should have a by-election.
I think they thought they could just get the next guy off the list, but it was right that they then went out to an election. I didn't want the costs of a by-election, but I knew that I couldn't stay on as a councillor. That was wrong.
So I conceded that, yep, no, if that's the way you want it, we will have a by-election, but it's going to cost. And I guess you say that's the cost of democracy.
The by-election will take place later in the year, but for now, a gung-ho Steve Chadwick departs to start her first parliamentary term in Wellington.
I was incredibly confident. You know, in government you can do anything.
She leaves behind a Rotorua enjoying one of its busiest summer seasons ever. Two visitor categories are especially making their presence felt. Still a comparatively new phenomenon, the numbers of backpackers passing through the city are showing a big increase this year, as are the scores of buses bringing visitors from giant cruise liners calling in at the port of Tauranga. And it's not just international tourists. With the lowest exchange rate in years, domestic visitors are more numerous as well. But at this tourist peak come disturbing headlines. Local crime levels are on the rise. They have been for some time. Some point to a need for a staffing increase for the Rotorua police. Police numbers are allocated from Wellington headquarters, who say that regionally Rotorua has its fair share. In fact, that's part of Steve Chadwick's mission to Wellington.
I was all for increasing police numbers. I mean, we knew we had a problem with offending and crime, and I saw the answer as more police. And there'd been a police review where they were going to cull police numbers, and that was an election plank of mine.
Others point a finger at the local media for delivering the message that Rotorua may not be the safest of destinations.
You know, it's a real concern because they go away with an image, and we spend so much money trying to create an image in here of friendliness and openness and the culture that we have to share. That issue of having crime on the front page was an issue that I took up with the editor. I think it happens, it's there, but maybe page 2. But maybe page 2 doesn't sell the paper.
It was our biggest bone of contention between the Daily Post and Graham. He got terribly upset whenever crime featured on the front page, particularly crime involving tourists. But you've got to be realistic about these things. And crime and tourism are not happy bedfellows.
The Daily Post is a paper of record, and some of this crime is very serious and it gets national coverage, and you can't blame the paper for doing what responsibly is its duty. As I say, it did leave us open with other aspects of the community with which to deal. But crime evidently sells, or stories about crime sells in the newspapers. It's not something that I agree with should be on the front page every day.
From his position at the coalface of local policing, for Dave Donaldson the problem of staff numbers is a difficult but explainable one.
Policing numbers is very much a political decision, way above the level of the local police commander. And around about 2000, I suspect, the dynamics were changing in the Bay of Plenty. Tauranga was starting its growth spurt. And Tauranga had traditionally been low crime, big proportion of the community were retired people, and so the biggest problem over there was getting bowled by an old duffer who wasn't paying attention, driving their car. But then things changed in Tauranga, you know, certainly the drug scene got really cranking, and that's right across New Zealand. and Tauranga had its share of that. We had been putting pressure on the gangs in Rotorua, and some of them moved across to Tauranga. And Tauranga is going through a huge growth spurt, and that's continued right now. So that was, I don't know when it was that they jumped to the front of the phone book over Rotorua, but certainly I suspect it was about those times that the policing numbers in other parts of the country, because of the changing population demographics, police shortages had to be addressed in other areas.
But it hasn't been all bad news over summer. 10 closed-circuit television cameras are being installed at key locations around the central business district, making up for a shortage of feet on the beat, monitored from a control room at the Rotorua police station. Besides tourism, the other key sectors of the local economy have been providing some good report cards. Dairy farmers particularly are keenly following news of a new development that could affect their futures. In 2000, Kevin Winter is not only a spokesman for the Rotorua Ratepayers Association,
numbers of heavy vehicles, approximately a third.
He is also a dairy farmer and member of Federated Farmers.
For me as a dairy farmer, it was the joining of the merger of Kiwi and New Zealand Dairy Group. We were really uncertain in terms of the JV that we had to pursue, but there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot of debate by dairy farmers as shareholders of Fonterra as to how we should go about getting more value for our milk. And I knew long term that the greatest competition was offshore for our products, so we needed the merger between Kiwi and New Zealand Dairy Group to go through.
During the summer of 2000, both the Daily Post and the Review have been covering improvements to the district's roads. Over the past 2 years, $11 million have gone into upgrading the 21-kilometre stretch of State Highway 5 between Rotorua and Rainbow Mountain. But it is closer to town that most motorists are experiencing the inconvenience of major roadworks. The Automobile Association reckons Tenai Road is the third most dangerous section of roading for traffic and pedestrians in New Zealand. And as a major arterial route to the coast and the port of Tauranga, traffic volumes have been steadily rising. Tenai Road is being widened. The Tarawera Road intersection, along a choke point and poorly drained in wet weather, is getting a roundabout. There will be more light-controlled pedestrian crossings as well. But in the meantime, roadworks are causing chaos for Eastsiders. There is also chaos on the other side of town. Old Taupo Road is getting a dramatic facelift as it turns into 4 lanes. But the work means lengthy and dusty inconvenience on a major route carrying more than 30,000 vehicles daily. A pain in the neck that will be quickly forgotten over the next decade. For now, the Review recalls the history of an area which goes back to the old horse and coach days. Tally Ho Street is a reminder of early hunt club days, for example, while Pururu Street recalls the important Te Arawa chief Rahurui Pururu. His family lived in Tarewa Road, where they now have some problems of their own. This is also an area settled by some of those displaced by the Tarawera eruption. Almost 120 years on, events volcanic in origin are again causing concern. Only 2 years ago, activity here meant a house eventually had to be condemned. has been another event, and the Post reports on the subsequent clean-up. Some say that increasing instability around Kuerau Park is due to the bore closures of 1987. But they certainly aren't complaining about that at Whakarewarewa. Here, Pahutu Geyser has gone through an impressive and exceptional resurgence and is playing more or less continuously for days at a time. Other long dormant features are also showing signs of life. To the south at Waitapu, the news is not so good. One of the region's important industries has suddenly run into trouble. Here at Waitapu, the Arataki company produced the results of the district's largest workforce by far. Honeybees, by the million, workers who are about to face a serious threat. Varroa jacobsoni is a honeybee killer mite, and it has just been found in hives in South Auckland. New Zealand and Australia are the world's only countries permitted to export live bees. Arataki, one of New Zealand's largest honey producers, has already had a valuable shipment of bees to Canada cancelled by MAF. But there could be wider implications if this nasty parasite almost inevitably spreads into the Bay of Plenty. So February and March 2000 are a worrying time for honey producers and those who depend on bee pollination for the well-being of their farms and orchards. From the summit of Rainbow Mountain, the view seems all-encompassing. And yet the vista only includes a fraction of what is being sought in a claim before the Waitangi Tribunal that has made front-page news in the Daily Post during February. In order to give more strength to their claim and to speed up the judicial process, a number of central North Island tribes, including Te Arawa, have amalgamated to form a mega-claim. The volcanic interior plateau settlement would see the transfer of assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, including most of the Kaingaroa forest and ownership rights to rivers and lakes in the area. In the following days, there is speculation about how well the Treaty Fund will cope with such a claim. Local tribal representatives point out that the claim is as much about the restoration of the mana of ownership as it is about the amount of money involved. But aspects of the question of ownership rights of Rotorua's lakes have gone on for some years. The possibility of those rights being transferred from the Crown to Te Arawa have been a concern which began to crystallise back in the late 1990s. Arguing the case for Te Arawa, Arapeta Tahana represents the Te Arawa Trust Board.
Number one, we want our relationship with the lakes restored and acknowledged. These lakes form part of our spiritual and our cultural identity. That means that until that relationship is restored, all of the other things, we will never sit happy in our own country. In fact, we regard ourselves almost as strangers in our own land. So the relationship between Te Arawa and the lakes has got to be restored formally and legally.
The Rotorua District Council has already gone some of the way towards meeting Te Arawa objectives, with a document that includes iwi in a strategy for administering the Rotorua lakes. Even so, opinion on the matter in Council has not been unanimous. Councillor Cliff Lee has gained a reputation for his outspokenness, especially on the matter of retaining public ownership of the lakes, and campaigned in the last local body elections virtually on this single issue.
We will see restrictions on the lake. I believe that we would see landing fees, boat licensing, a number of different restrictions, including the ability to close those lakes should an accident happen or should some other reason come forward to actually restrict the use of those lakes.
Now in 2000, the Daily Post reports Cliff Lee trying to get what is rightfully called the lakebed ownership question debated at a full council meeting. As far as the Mayor is concerned, the position is clear.
It was definitely a government to Rotorua issue, and we really didn't have any standing at all.
And in this he gets the support of a clear council majority.
There was a lot of pressure put on council to either support Rotorua in their bid for the lakes, or indeed the contrary pressure that was put on was by others in the community who said you must oppose it. So what council did was really stayed right out of the debate. Many times people like Cliff Lee, would try to get it on the table, but always councillors, myself included, shied off the debate by saying it's a central government issue, they must deal with it, let us not put our finger in the water, figuratively speaking.
I think it's extraordinarily important. I mean, you can't allow a country to back itself into a corner simply because you're not right at the center of the decision making. Those that passed it on to central government were basically cowards. They were afraid to get stuck in, they were afraid to be labeled, and they wanted central government to solve what central government perceived to be a problem for them.
Perhaps the prevailing mood of optimism of the new millennium and the traditional Rotorua custom of bicultural cooperation is another factor weighing against Cliff Lee and his supporters. But for both local papers, his opposing view makes for interesting and provoking reading.
Every city needs a Cliff Lee, every town needs a Cliff Lee. Cliff Lee is a man who likes to be his own point of difference.
He was awfully well read, and I think a bit misguided in his letters, which could be seen as racist. But we ran them because that said more about Cliff than it did about the review, and it also invited debate.
Even when Cliff Lee continues to attempt to provoke further council discussion, it appears the question of lakebed ownership will clearly remain an issue to be decided in Wellington. Not that a speedy resolution is expected. In Wellington, Steve Chadwick is also discovering some realities of central government, and the Daily Post reports on a distinct lack of progress in getting any additional police for Rotorua. She has to make do with an assurance that future restructuring will not lower staffing numbers any further. In the meantime, the district has been enjoying a long hot autumn, and the month of March has been even warmer than usual. Brian Holden has a long-held interest in weather, to the extent he has a fully equipped weather station set up at his Springfield home.
This is just my daily stuff. Every day I go out outside to read the weather, and it all goes down onto that sheet.
Okay.
Then from then it goes onto the computer. It looks high tech, but in actual fact, it's low tech because it's manual. Much better on the
Brian has a complete record of Rotorua weather statistics that goes back more than 20 years.
Rotorua, being inland, we're not subject to excessive temperature of wind. We're one of the least windiest places in the country. The reason for that is simply because we're inland.
So when our local weather guru says it's been hot, the Daily Post takes notice. February only produced 8 millimetres of rain for the entire month, and now March has seen one day reaching 30 degrees, the highest March temperature for 50 years. The long spell of fine weather means the new mall construction is proceeding well, and most Rotorua retailers are now accepting the reality of the impending completion of this new shopping precinct. Everyone is preparing for one of the busiest weekends on the calendar. This year, Easter falls alongside Anzac Day, producing a break of 5 days. The Daily Post makes some predictions. And Rotorua MP Steve Chadwick promises to get rid of the Easter Sunday trading restrictions for the city in time for Easter next year.
With me is Scotty Watson from Ready to Retail. Scotty, I believe...
Under the banner Ready to Retail is coordinator and keen advocate for the CBD retailers, Scotty Watson. A small business owner himself, since taking up the role, Scotty has established a reputation for drive and enthusiasm. He has also become a well-known figure to both local newspapers.
I have no idea where Scotty came from originally, but he bounced up the stairs to the Daily Post newsroom one day, introduced himself and said, "I'm going to liven this place up." He and his wife had just bought the Nina Sewing Centre, and he worked as hard as he possibly could to bring life back into retail in Rotorua.
We came to know Scotty pretty well here. He was a great enthusiast. An understanding relationship. Scotty was naturally a Rotorua progressive, and he always wrote in the Daily Post or had letters published and so on. But now and again he'd slip us a little story that nobody knew about and nobody knew the source of it. And we got on with Scotty very, very well here.
While Scotty and the Rotorua shop operators prepare for the Easter rush, for the Rotorua District Councillors, it's been business as usual. Rotorua Boys High School wants to build a multi-million-dollar Millennium Student Centre, and they've asked for a $300,000 council contribution. That was turned down last year. Now they're back with a revised proposal, which seems to have swayed that original council reluctance.
The first time they came, they applied for what we called the Community Asset Fund, and they applied for use of some of that building that they were building, that it would be used by the public. The first time they came, they didn't persuade council. The second time they came in the following year, very persuasively, their team persuaded council that it would be useful for the public, and the vote slid that way to fund them the $300,000.
But the commitment of a far larger sum is also under discussion. Millions of dollars will be needed if plans for further development of the International Stadium are to go ahead. When new state-of-the-art lighting was installed in 1998, it came with the promise that it was creating a much more valuable and marketable outdoor venue.
Well, there's challenges now for council, really. That's the next challenge. They've got to get their act together in regard to getting a marketing team which can actually start to market the lights as the infrastructure which they need. So really the challenge is back with council once again.
But it is not just nighttime lighting meeting the high technical demands of television that is becoming a prerequisite for the new but still emerging era of professional rugby union football. Hard wooden covered seating for a mere 1,700 spectators no longer cuts the mustard at a time when lucrative corporate sponsorship and higher ticket prices loom. People like Rotorua property developer Ray Cook believe the stadium ante must go even higher.
7,000 covered seats and also 10 corporate boxes and also a lounge facility. So yes, we're looking forward to that scheme plan becoming available towards the end of next week, and obviously it'll be fundraising again to pay for it. So yeah.
Of course, the Rotorua District Councillors are used to dealing with the often strident demands from their business people. Much discussion is conducted away from the main meeting chamber in more intimate surroundings of the committee rooms. And a fair amount of lobbying goes on in the even less formal atmosphere of the green room. It's in an environment like this that Deputy Mayor Johnny Lepper operates best. But he's not just a persuasive influence on council, He's also chairman of the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust, an organisation that has become an increasingly beneficial force in Rotorua affairs since its inception in October 1993. Astute management has considerably enhanced its funds since then, and it has a simple mission statement: to act for the benefit of the Rotorua community. Now Johnny Lepper has seen this disturbing headline that has been provoked by comments from a past curator of the Rotorua Museum of Art and History. Between 1978 and 1998, John Perry oversaw the integration of Rotorua's public art collection into the museum mainstream. But to his ongoing frustration, the funding of the acquisition of further artworks was always well down in council priorities. However, he did manage to develop one vital addition to the museum facilities.
This facility, away from the sulphur, where the works are safe and are housed in optimum, ideal museum conditions, is a very important leap forward, because many of these things were stored in the basement of the bathhouse. There was heavy levels of sulphur, and the sulphur affected everything. It affected books, it affected photographs, it affected anything with silver and brass and metal, copper. All that stuff went off, boom, virtually overnight. It affected many things in the social history collection, and of course any of the paintings that were old, that had lead paint, all went black or silver, in the sulphur. So getting a storage facility like this, where the works are in that absolutely neutral environment, is really critical. Johnny Lepper's original vision, which was absolutely fantastic, was based on the fact that there were paintings of the pink and white terraces coming up for auction, and there was a big threat that they were going to be sold to overseas buyers. This is auctions up here in Auckland, and there's no restriction on removing them out of the country, and that struck alarm bells in Johnny, and he said, look, we've got to keep these paintings here because this is Rotorua heritage. So he, in his miraculous ways, worked with the Energy Trust, got some money put aside so that when these paintings came up for auction, they could be acquired and build up the collection.
But while John Perry will now be able to carry out an art heritage hunt with funding he could only dream about when he was the museum's curator, what of the Rotorua art scene of the present in the year 2000? Once again, largesse from the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust is involved.
I want to get from you what is happening and what you think about the presentations tonight.
This was a scene at a well-attended meeting in 1999 as Mayor Hall explained the possibilities and options for a new Rotorua Community Arts Centre to stakeholders, a corporate speak term just coming into vogue. To be built on the corner of Hinimoa and Hinimaru streets, the centre is part of the Trust's Millennium gift to the city to the tune of $800,000. And plans showed how some of the existing buildings would be incorporated into a village-style centre with facilities for a wide range of artistic activities. But since that meeting, estimated building costs have almost doubled. Headlines announce the project is now in stall mode as council wrestles with other infrastructure funding pressures like the International Stadium. In the end, it will all come down to the vote.
It all depends on the vote at the table. As I always say, to win anything you need 7 votes. That's a majority when you've got 13 people sat at the table.